You know that feeling on a hot summer night when the city just feels like a giant oven long after the sun has gone down? Well, today we're putting on our detective hats to solve the curious case of the hot city. So let's get right to it with the central mystery. Why are our cities always, and I mean always, warmer than the countryside right next door? It seems like a simple question, but trust me, the answer is a really fascinating puzzle of physics, geometry, and a little bit of engineering. All right, so let's start our investigation by looking at the phenomenon itself. This isn't some new mystery, it's a pretty well-documented case, and understanding these first few clues is absolutely key to cracking it. Now, this temperature gap actually has a name. It's called the urban heat island, and believe it or not, this isn't a new discovery at all. In fact, scientists have been on this case for a very, very long time. The first person to really notice it was a guy named Luke Howard, way back in the 1830s. And Howard just nailed it. He called it an artificial climate that we've created ourselves. I mean, think about that. Almost 200 years ago, it was already crystal clear that the way we build our cities fundamentally changes the environment inside them. Okay, so every good mystery needs some solid evidence, right? Let's examine our first set of clues. To really solve this, we've got to see how temperatures in the city and the countryside act over a full 24-hour cycle. Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Take a look at the timing here. Around noon, things are pretty similar. But then, watch what happens as the sun goes down. The countryside starts to cool off, and fast. The city, though, not so much. And the biggest difference, the absolute peak of this heat island effect, happens in the dead of night, right around 3 a.m. So here it is. This is the key clue. The main mystery of the urban heat island isn't really about cities getting hotter during the day. It's all about why they are so incredibly bad at cooling down at night. That slow release of heat, that's what we need to figure out. So to get to the bottom of this slow cooling, we need to basically become forensic accountants for energy. We've got to crack the energy code and see how cities and rural areas handle the sun's energy in totally different ways. And the tool we use for this is called an energy balance. The easiest way to think about it is like a budget. When sunlight hits any surface, that energy has to go somewhere. It can bounce off, it can get absorbed and stored as heat, it can heat up the air directly, or, and this is a big one, it can be used to evaporate water, which actually cools things down. Let's look at the countryside's budget first. In an area with lots of plants and soil and water, a massive chunk of that solar energy, more than half, goes into evaporation. This is basically nature's air conditioner. It's constantly releasing moisture and cooling the air around it. Pretty cool, right? Now, let's flip over to the city's budget. And whoa, it's a completely different story. Since there's way less water and greenery, very little energy is spent on that cooling evaporation. Instead, a ton of it goes into just directly heating the air. That's what we call sensible heat. And a huge amount gets soaked up and stored right in the buildings and roads. Okay, it's time for the big reveal. Let's unmask the prime suspects behind the city's stubborn warmth. And it really all comes down to the case of the urban canyons. So, here's our lineup. You've got things like air pollution, all that waste heat pouring out of cars and air conditioners, and of course, the lack of plants. And yeah, they all play a part. But our investigation has zeroed in on two main culprits who are doing most of the damage. Culprit number one is the very shape of the city. All those tall buildings create these deep street canyons. So during the day, sunlight gets bounced around and trapped down there. But then at night, that same canyon shape makes it incredibly hard for heat to escape. The buildings literally block the view of the cold night sky, so the heat just radiates back and forth between the walls instead of escaping into space. And our second major culprit? It's the stuff we build our cities with. Concrete, asphalt, brick, they all have what's called a high thermal admittance. That's just a fancy way of saying they are amazing at absorbing and storing heat. They're like giant batteries, just charging up with the sun's energy all day long, and then slowly, slowly releasing it all through the night, keeping the whole city toasty warm. And here it is, the smoking gun. This is the final slam dunk piece of evidence. Research shows this incredibly strong link between something called the sky view factor, basically how much open sky you can see from the street, and how intense the heat island gets. The less sky you can see, the hotter it stays at night. It's that direct. Case closed. So, we've solved the mystery. We know who the culprits are. But so what? Why does this actually matter? Well, understanding the urban heat island is way more than just a fun science puzzle. It has huge, real-world consequences.
And this effect isn't just one simple thing. It actually has layers. Down here, where we live and walk, we feel what's called the canopy layer. That's the heat from the canyons and the building materials. But all that heat rises, and it creates a boundary layer, a massive dome of warm, often polluted air that sits over the entire city, trapping emissions and even affecting the weather.
And that's the bottom line, really. By getting to the root causes, we can start to engineer solutions. We can actually design cities that aren't just places to live, but are more comfortable, that use way less energy for cooling, and are just flat out more sustainable for all of us.
And that leaves us with one last, really big question. We've cracked the case. We know why our cities are so hot. So the next step is to ask, what are we going to do about it? How can we take this knowledge and use it to build the cooler, smarter cities of tomorrow?